Ex-husband invited broke ex to his wedding. She arrived with triplets and Navy SEAL husband. The air was thick with mist, and the faint scent of distant rain, carrying with it a chill that could seep into one's bones. In the quiet of her modest home on the edge of the city, Leora stood by a cracked wooden window, staring at the black clouds gathering over the distant palace. A letter lay on the table before her, sealed with gold wax and stamped with the royal crest she once knew intimately. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. The writing was unmistakable. Kaelin, her former betrothed and once the most powerful lord of Eldrith, had summoned her to witness his forthcoming wedding. The edges of the paper felt cold against her skin. Leora remembered the day she had been cast out, a woman scorned, stripped of her title and left to wander through shadows and hardship. Her heart ached with bitter memories, yet beneath it stirred a flicker of defiance. They thought she was broken, vulnerable, powerless. Perhaps this would be her moment to prove them wrong. Kaelin's hall in the palace was already buzzing with preparation. Servants scurried like shadows, carrying silver candelabras and embroidered banners. The scent of spiced wine mingled with burning torches, filling the great hall with an intoxicating warmth. Every detail whispered wealth, power, and the legacy of a man who had once commanded her heart and now commanded the kingdom. Kaelin himself stood near the dais, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with practiced ease. He looked unchanged, tall, strong, and untouchable, but beneath the calm mask there was a storm of emotion he refused to reveal. His gaze lingered only briefly on the arriving guests, but a letter had arrived earlier, informing him of a familiar presence among them. Leora, the woman who had once held his heart in her hands, would soon walk into the hall. Leora did not enter like a frightened exile. She had grown stronger during her years of wandering and struggle. The journey had hardened her, tempered her spirit, and forged her into someone unrecognizable to those who had known her before. With her came three small figures, their eyes bright and sharp like twin moons, holding onto her skirts as they walked. Her husband, a tall, stoic warrior of the king's guard, followed silently, his presence radiating a quiet, commanding strength that few dared challenge. As the doors of the great hall swung open, a hush fell over the crowd. Whispers ran through the air like wildfire. "Is that Leora? She has children. And that man, who is he?" Kaelin's eyes widened imperceptibly. The sight before him stirred a tangle of emotions he had long buried: shock, disbelief, and a pang of longing he could not suppress. Leora's hair, dark as midnight, flowed freely over her shoulders. Her dress, simple yet elegant, caught the torchlight, illuminating her in a way that made her seem almost ethereal. But it was not the dress or her beauty that held his attention. It was the aura of strength, resilience, and independence she carried like armor. The three children clung to her skirts, their small hands gripping tightly. They were beautiful, with bright eyes and mischievous smiles, yet there was a gravity to them, a quiet intelligence that made Kaelin's brow furrow. He recognized something familiar in their gaze, a spark of cunning and courage that reminded him of Leora. Her husband, the silent guardian beside her, met Kaelin's gaze with measured caution. His eyes were steel, sharp and unwavering, and in that moment Kaelin understood that this man was not a mere protector. He was a warrior of unmatched skill, one who would not hesitate to defend Leora and her children with deadly precision. The hall seemed to shrink around them, the whispers dying as all eyes turned to the unexpected arrival. Leora's lips curved into a small, confident smile as she walked forward, her steps steady, deliberate, and full of silent challenge. She had been invited as a guest, but she entered as someone no one could ignore. The bride-to-be, a woman of noble lineage and beauty, paused mid-laughter at the sudden silence. She glanced toward Kaelin, a flicker of confusion crossing her features, and then toward Leora. There was a tension in the air, almost tangible, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Kaelin straightened, forcing himself to mask the turmoil he felt. His pride would not allow him to show weakness, not here, not now. Yet inside his mind raced. Leora had changed. She was no longer the fragile woman he had once loved and betrayed. She was a force, and her force had grown stronger, wilder, and untouchable. Leora approached the dais with measured steps, bowing slightly to the bride, yet her eyes never left Kaelin. There was a storm in her gaze, a mixture of history, grief, and unspoken words, that made the hall feel smaller, the air heavier, and the tension almost unbearable. The ceremony began, the officiant reciting words of union, but Leora's presence cast a shadow over every spoken vow. Kaelin's heart beat with an unfamiliar urgency, his thoughts tangled between the past and the present. Her new husband's hand brushed lightly against her back, a reminder of the bond they now shared, a bond forged in loyalty, protection, and unspoken understanding. The three children, unaware of the emotional battle unfolding, fidgeted at her side. Their small hands occasionally brushed Kaelin's robes, their innocent presence reminding him of what might have been and what could never be. He felt a pull toward them, a strange mixture of affection and regret, yet he dared not act. As the vows were spoken and the first sip of ceremonial wine passed among the guests, a sudden flicker of shadow passed through the hall. The torches flickered violently and the temperature dropped. A hush fell, heavier than before. Leora's children stiffened, their small hands gripping her skirts even tighter. Kaelin noticed the change immediately, a ripple of magic, subtle but undeniable, brushing through the hall. He had sensed such forces before, but never so close, never so directed, and never in connection with Leora. His heart thrummed with unease, and he felt the first stirrings of fear, not for himself but for her. Leora's husband shifted slightly, his hand moving closer to the hilt of his blade. He had felt it too. A shadow of something ancient, dark, and dangerous had entered the hall. The faint whisper of curses long buried seemed to stir in the air, touching the edges of reality. Leora, however, remained calm, though her eyes darkened with focus. She placed her hands gently on her children's shoulders, as if grounding them, protecting them from the unseen threat. For a brief moment, her strength shone like a beacon, a silent declaration that she would not be intimidated, not by any force, mortal or supernatural. The officiant faltered, sensing the tension, but Kaelin's gaze never left her. In that instant, he saw clearly the truth he had tried to bury. Leora was no longer a woman to be underestimated. She had survived exile, hardship, and solitude, and she had returned not as a victim, but as a storm. The shadow dissipated almost as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a whisper of unease. The ceremony continued, yet the energy in the hall had shifted irreversibly. Guests glanced nervously at one another, whispering in hushed tones, sensing that something extraordinary had just occurred. Kaelin's chest tightened. He felt a mix of anger, longing, and fear, emotions he could not reconcile. Leora's gaze met his, and for a heartbeat, the years of separation melted away. Yet in that glance he also saw a warning. She had moved on, grown stronger, and carried within her heart a fire that could consume him if he were not careful. By the time the ceremony concluded, Leora and her family withdrew to a side chamber, their movements graceful and commanding. Kaelin followed, drawn by curiosity and an inexplicable need to understand what had changed so profoundly in her. Her husband's protective stance reminded him that any step closer must be measured, careful, and respectful. Leora's eyes, dark and steady, met Kaelin's as he approached. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture that spoke volumes, a greeting, a warning, and a challenge all at once. The three children watched curiously, their eyes bright with innocence yet shimmering with a strange awareness that belied their years. "I see you have grown stronger," Kaelin said quietly, his voice low, almost a whisper. "And you have grown complacent," Leora replied softly, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. Perhaps it is time you remember who I truly am. Kalen's heart skipped a beat. He knew, deep down, that whatever came next would change everything. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by shadows and whispers, the stage was set for a confrontation neither of them could avoid. The palace of Eldrith, grand and foreboding, had never seemed smaller to Kalen. Every corridor, every torchlit hall, seemed to close in around him as he walked beside Leora and her family. Her presence was magnetic, undeniable, yet somehow untouchable. Her new husband, silent and ever watchful, moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior, a shadow that never faltered, always alert to unseen dangers. The children, three small wards with bright eyes and quiet curiosity, trailed behind their mother like sparks of living light. There was something different about them, something Kalen could not place, an aura of power or knowledge beyond their years. Each glance they gave him carried the weight of wisdom and mischief intertwined, as if they had been watching him all along. In the grand hall where the wedding had been celebrated, Leora's children lingered near a fountain, their hands trailing over its dark stone edges. The water shimmered unnaturally, reflecting the flickering torchlight as if alive. Kalen noticed that the shadows beneath the surface seemed to twist and curl, almost in response to the children's presence. Leora's husband stepped beside him, silent yet imposing, and gave a subtle nod, a warning to keep his distance. The tension between the three men, one filled with pride, one with curiosity, one with protective resolve, was thick enough to taste. "They are remarkable," Kalen said quietly, his eyes lingering on the children. "There is something unusual about them. I have never seen anything like it." Leora turned, her gaze calm and measured. "They are gifts and burdens," she said softly, her voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. "They carry the blood of an old line, one that has always been touched by magic." Kalen's heart skipped. He had heard whispers of such families, of children born with the echo of ancient power in their veins. He had seen such power before in the legends of Eldrith, but never so close, never so real. The air shifted suddenly, and Kalen felt the first prickling of unease. A faint whisper of magic brushed the edges of the hall, subtle but undeniable. Leora noticed it immediately. Her hand brushed against the sleeve of her husband's arm, grounding herself and the children in a protective stance. "They feel it too," she murmured. "The shadows are not asleep. Something moves, watching us." Her husband's eyes narrowed, scanning the hall as if expecting the darkness to leap from the walls. "We must leave," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "It will find us if we stay." Kalen's pride bristled, but he did not argue. He could feel the truth in the words, and he knew that whatever they were facing, it was beyond any normal threat. The group moved through the palace corridors, shadows stretching unnaturally as the torches flickered. Every step seemed to echo in the silence, amplified by the weight of unseen eyes. Leora led them with confidence, each movement precise, her children following in silent obedience. Kalen could not help but notice how effortlessly she commanded the space around her. Even her husband, usually so stoic, seemed deferential to her authority. They reached a side chamber, smaller and less ornate than the main halls, yet filled with an aura of history. Ancient symbols were carved into the stone walls, faint lines of magic tracing their edges. Leora gestured for the children to step forward, and they did, their small hands glowing faintly as they touched the carvings. The symbols reacted immediately, the stone humming with energy. Kalen stepped closer, unable to hide his awe. What are they doing?" he asked. "They are waking the wards," Leora replied. "These children are not ordinary. They carry the legacy of a family cursed long ago, a legacy that was hidden to protect them, and now it cannot remain hidden." The children's eyes glimmered with a strange light, and Kalen felt a pull in his chest, a mixture of fear and fascination. He had faced armies, beasts, and shadows, but never had he seen power like this in such small beings. The faint glow of their hands traced intricate patterns in the air, patterns that Kalen recognized from the texts he had once studied in the royal archives. Leora's husband stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "This is dangerous," he warned. "If the wrong eyes see this, the shadows will come for them." Kalen's gaze shifted to him, a mix of respect and wariness in his eyes. "And who decides what is wrong, you or her?" Her husband's jaw tightened. "We survive together or not at all. She leads, I follow." "That is the way." Kalen studied him, noting the unspoken bond between them, a bond forged in loyalty and trust. He felt a pang of jealousy he did not expect, a reminder that Leora's life had moved on while he remained bound to the past. The hallways grew darker as they continued their journey toward the hidden temple beneath the palace, a place few dared enter. The children held Leora's hands tightly, their small fingers intertwined with hers as if drawing strength from her presence. Kalen noticed how the shadows seemed to bend around her, reluctant to touch her, yet the faint whisper of magic persisted, an almost sentient curiosity that followed them. "You feel it, don't you?" Leora said quietly, glancing at Kalen. "The shadows, the old curse, it is watching, waiting." Kalen nodded, swallowing hard. He had felt it too, a cold awareness that prickled his skin and made his blood run taut. "I have never felt anything like this," he admitted. "It is alive." Leora smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and sadness. "It has always been alive. My family has carried its weight for generations. The children, they are the bridge between what was and what must be." Finally, they reached the temple, a circular chamber carved deep into the stone beneath the palace. Torches mounted along the walls burned with a steady flame, yet the shadows within the room moved as if breathing, stretching toward the center. Ancient runes glowed faintly on the floor, a soft blue light that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. Leora stepped into the center, her children at her sides. Her husband positioned himself between them and the entrance, a silent guardian. Kalen followed, his eyes scanning the walls and the shadows, wary of what might emerge. "The wards must awaken fully," Leora said, her voice steady. "Only then can we understand the power we face and the threat that comes with it." The children stepped forward, their small hands moving in harmony as they traced the glowing runes. The air trembled with energy, a low hum vibrating through the chamber. Shadows gathered at the edges, watching, waiting. Kalen felt the pull of the magic, a force both beautiful and terrifying, as if the room itself were alive. Suddenly, one of the children, the smallest, lifted his head. His eyes glowed brighter than before, and a voice, soft yet commanding, echoed in the chamber. "It knows we are here." Kalen froze. He could feel the weight of the words in his bones. The shadows shifted, coiling like serpents, and a cold wind swept through the chamber. Leora's children tightened their grip on her hands, their small bodies trembling but unyielding. "It will come," Leora whispered. "The darkness that has hunted my family for centuries, it knows we are awakening the wards, and it will not wait quietly." Her husband stepped closer, his hand brushing lightly against the hilt of his blade. "Then we will be ready," he said, his voice firm. "Together." Kalen studied them, a mix of awe and unease twisting inside him. He had expected a simple return to a wedding hall, a reminder of the past. Instead, he had stumbled into a world of magic, curses, and power beyond comprehension. And at the center of it all stood Leora, unyielding, unafraid, and more formidable than he had ever imagined. As the shadows gathered closer, the chamber seemed to shrink. The runes glowed brighter, the air thickened, and the children's voices rose in unison, chanting words Kalen did not understand. He felt the pull of the magic, strong and insistent, like a tide trying to pull him under. Leora's hand tightened on his arm, grounding him, reminding him of their shared history. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the shadows. "If we survive this, nothing will ever be the same again." And in that moment, Kalen realized she was right. The world he had known, the kingdom he had ruled, and the love he had once taken for granted were all shifting beneath his feet. The darkness that had watched silently for centuries was now awake, and it had marked them all. The shadows retreated only slightly as the children's magic flared, a faint glow surrounding them like protective flames. Leora's voice rang out, steady and commanding, cutting through the tension that thickened the air. "Do not falter. The curse is watching, but we are stronger together." Kaelin's eyes never left her. She moved with a calm authority he had long forgotten, her strength both intimidating and captivating. Every instinct in him screamed to step forward, to protect, to claim what he had lost. But her husband's presence reminded him that some battles required respect, not conquest. The chamber itself seemed alive. Ancient runes pulsed with energy, echoing the power in the children. Shadows lingered along the edges, coiling and twisting like serpents, silent witnesses to the awakening. Kaelin felt the weight of the curse pressing on him, a cold touch on his spine, whispering regrets long buried and mistakes yet to come. Leora stepped forward, placing herself between Kaelin, her husband, and the children. Her dark eyes flared and a wave of energy radiated from her, as if the very walls obeyed her command. "This curse is older than any of us," she said, her voice resonant. "It seeks to divide, to turn loyalty into fear, but we will not allow it." Kaelin clenched his fists. He had faced countless enemies, rebels, beasts, treacherous allies, but none had threatened him with the weight of memory, regret, and longing all at once. He had underestimated Leora once, and the consequences had haunted him for years. Now, standing here in the dim glow of the chamber, he knew he could not underestimate her again. Her husband's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, eyes scanning the shadows with careful precision. "We fight as one," he said. "Anything less will fail." Kaelin nodded, swallowing hard. Pride battled with necessity, and he chose the latter. The curse would not wait for ego or rivalry. The children stepped forward, small hands weaving complex patterns in the air. The runes responded immediately, glowing brighter, sending tremors through the chamber. Kaelin watched in awe as a faint hum of magic vibrated through the floor, walls, and ceiling, binding them all in a fragile web of energy. Suddenly, a shadow lunged from the far corner, a twisting black form that moved like liquid but struck with the intent of a predator. Leora's husband reacted first, drawing his blade and meeting the shadow with a controlled swing. Sparks of dark energy exploded on impact, sending a ripple through the room. Kaelin's heart pounded. He could feel the curse watching him, testing him. He stepped forward, raising his hands instinctively, summoning the faint magic that lingered in his blood, a gift he had never fully embraced. A surge of energy shot from his fingertips, striking the shadow and forcing it back. Leora's gaze met his briefly, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Mutual understanding, respect, and a shared history intertwined with the danger surrounding them. The shadows recoiled but did not disappear. They writhed and twisted, forming shapes that hinted at long-forgotten memories and faces Kaelin had once loved. The walls of the chamber seemed to echo with whispers, voices that threatened to overwhelm his senses. "You cannot save her. You cannot save them. You failed." Kaelin gritted his teeth. He had failed once before, and he refused to do so again. He focused, channeling his energy into a shield that enveloped them all. The children's glow intensified, responding to his will, forming a protective dome that repelled the shadows temporarily. Leora's husband moved to flank the children, guarding them with silent efficiency. Kaelin realized that together, their powers formed a delicate balance, strength, loyalty, and raw magic intertwining to keep the darkness at bay. Time seemed to stretch. The shadows pulsed, testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses. Kaelin could feel the curse probing his heart, tugging at old regrets and unspoken desires. He remembered the day he had let Leora go, the choices he had made out of pride, and the emptiness that followed. Leora's eyes softened for a fraction of a second as she watched him struggle with his inner conflict. "You cannot fight alone," she said softly, almost a whisper, but it carried through the chamber. "Trust the bond we share, trust yourself, and trust us." Kalen swallowed hard. Pride and vulnerability warred within him, but he knew she was right. Alone, none of them could withstand the darkness. Together, they had a chance, fragile but real. The shadows surged again, coiling around the children like a living net. Leora stepped forward, raising her hands. A golden glow erupted, bright and searing, and the shadows hissed in pain. Kalen joined her, his magic reinforcing hers, while her husband struck decisively, cutting through the advancing darkness. The chamber shook as the struggle intensified. Kalen felt the children's energy responding to him, almost as if they recognized him as a part of the force defending them. He was not merely an observer, he was a participant, a link in the chain holding back centuries of malice. Sweat dripped down his brow, but he did not falter. Every strike, every pulse of magic, every movement was tied to Leora's, her husband's, and the children's will. In that moment, he realized the truth of what she had always known. Strength was not measured by power alone, but by the courage to protect, the willingness to trust, and the ability to sacrifice. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently, before retreating toward the corners of the chamber. Kalen and Leora lowered their hands slightly, breathing heavily, the glow from the children's magic dimming but still steady. Her husband turned to Kalen, eyes sharp. "You have courage," he said. "Do not waste it. The curse is relentless, but we can endure it if we remain united." Kalen nodded, feeling a mixture of respect and newfound humility. "I will not fail again," he said quietly, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The children, sensing a moment of calm, gathered around Leora. Their small hands glowed softly, forming a protective circle. Kalen watched, struck by the innocence and power entwined in their forms. For the first time, he understood that the legacy they carried was both a burden and a gift, a bridge between light and shadow, past and future. Leora's gaze met Kalen's again, steady and unwavering. "You see now," she said, her voice carrying both strength and gentleness, "why I had to leave, why I had to grow beyond the past. The curse does not forgive weakness, and neither should we." Kalen nodded, the weight of his mistakes pressing against his chest. Yet he also felt a spark of hope, a possibility that he could make amends, not just for her, but for himself. Redemption was not easy, but it was attainable if he embraced the struggle rather than feared it. A sudden tremor shook the chamber. The shadows had not fully retreated, they were regrouping, stronger, smarter. Kalen, Leora, and her husband exchanged quick glances. The challenge was far from over. "This is only the beginning," Leora said firmly. "The curse will return stronger than before, but we are ready. We must remain vigilant, and together." Kalen felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. He had always been a man of action, but now he realized that some battles required more than swords and skill. They required trust, loyalty, and the willingness to confront the darkness within as well as without. Her husband's hand rested lightly on the children's shoulders, a silent affirmation that they would face whatever came together. Kalen felt a flicker of warmth in his chest, a reminder that even amidst shadows and curses, bonds could be forged stronger than fear. The children's magic dimmed, the glow fading to a soft shimmer. Kalen stepped forward, reaching toward them, and the smallest child looked up, eyes wide with curiosity and recognition. The connection was fleeting but profound, a reminder that the future depended on their unity, their courage, and their ability to endure together. Leora placed a hand on Kalen's arm, steadying him, reminding him silently of the trust she had extended. "Do not be afraid to stand with us," she said softly. "The shadows test all of us, but together we are more than they can break." Kalen swallowed hard. He could feel the truth in her words. He had once let pride dictate his choices, but now, standing in the heart of the curse's power, He understood that strength came not from dominion, but from courage, loyalty, and love. Love in all its forms. For family, for friends, and for the bonds that endure through darkness. The shadows pulsed one last time, retreating into the corners of the chamber, as if marking a temporary truce. The chamber was silent, heavy with the aftermath of the struggle, yet there was a sense of fragile victory. Kaylin, Leora, her husband, and the children stood together, bound by shared effort, trust, and the knowledge that the battle was far from over. Leora's eyes softened, a brief glimpse of the woman he had once loved shining through her strength. "We survived," she said, voice calm but tinged with emotion. "And we will continue to survive together." Kalen nodded, feeling a surge of emotion he had not anticipated. Redemption was no longer an abstract hope. It was a possibility he could grasp, if he had the courage to continue walking this path beside them. The volcanic cliffs of Eldrith rose before them, jagged and black, bathed in the crimson glow of the setting sun. The kingdom below trembled with the distant echoes of the curse, a force older than any living soul. Leora's family, herself, her husband, the 3 children, and Kaylin stood at the edge of the precipice, staring into the roiling shadows that swirled like living smoke along the horizon. "This is where it ends," Leora said softly, her eyes fixed on the darkness. "Or where it begins again." Kaylin's jaw tightened. He had fought shadows, faced armies, and battled his own regrets, but this was unlike anything he had encountered. The curse was alive, intelligent, and merciless. It sought not just to harm, but to test their hearts, to exploit every fear, weakness, and hesitation. Her husband moved closer, placing a protective hand on Leora's shoulder. "We are ready," he said quietly, his voice steady. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Kaelin studied them both. Pride warred with humility, but he knew she was right. Alone, none of them could survive. Together, they had a chance, even against a force that had haunted generations. The children stepped forward, small hands raised, eyes glowing faintly as their magic began to pulse in harmony with the runes etched into the ground beneath the cliffs. Kaelin felt the energy sweep through him like a tidal wave, a force that connected them all. It was terrifying in its intensity, but it also carried a strange warmth, a reminder that they were not alone. Suddenly, the shadows erupted from the cliffs like a tide of darkness, twisting and writhing, forming shapes that seemed almost human yet impossible. They hissed, their voices carrying centuries of rage and sorrow. Kaelin felt a chill crawl up his spine, but he did not step back. Leora's eyes blazed with determination. "Hold your ground," she commanded. "Do not let fear rule you." Her husband drew his sword, its blade catching the last rays of the sun, a silver promise of protection. Kaelin raised his hands, channeling the faint magic that lingered within him, the same force he had begun to trust during the battle in the hidden temple. Together, their powers wove a protective barrier around the children. The shadows surged forward, striking at the barrier. Energy flared, the wind screaming through the cliffs, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. Kaelin could feel the curse probing his heart, whispering regrets and past mistakes in his ears. "You cannot save her, you failed once before, fail again." He gritted his teeth, shaking off the fear. "No," he whispered, voice firm. "Not this time, I will not fail. Not her. Not them." Beside him, Leora's husband blocked a tendril of shadow with a precise strike, and Leora's hands glowed as she reinforced the magical shield. The children, though small, contributed with all their power, their bright energy weaving through the barrier, turning fear into strength. Kaelin glanced at Leora. In her eyes, he saw the fire that had always drawn him to her, strength, courage, and an unyielding will. He understood then that redemption was not just about righting his past mistakes. It was about standing together, even when the darkness seemed endless. The shadows swirled higher, coalescing into a massive, serpentine form that towered over the group. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, ancient and merciless. Kalen could feel its gaze piercing him, probing the deepest parts of his soul. Leora stepped forward, lifting her hands toward the creature. "You will not touch them," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "This ends now," the creature hissed, striking with multiple tendrils, each one seeking to shatter the barrier. Kalen and her husband met the attack head-on, their combined strength forming a bulwark that held the shadows at bay. The children's magic pulsed brighter, responding to their parents' determination, forming a ring of light that surrounded them all. Kalen felt something stir within him, a well of power he had ignored for too long. He focused, letting go of fear and pride, and channeled it into the heart of the barrier. The glow intensified, washing over the children, Leora and her husband. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the combined strength of their united will. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a red glow over the cliffs. The serpentine shadow hovered, almost dazed by the sudden surge of energy. Kalen felt his chest tighten, the weight of his past sins pressing down, but he knew he had the chance to make it right. "You are not alone," he said, voice steady. "We stand together and we are stronger than your darkness." Leora's eyes met his, and in that moment there was understanding, forgiveness, and trust. He was no longer the man who had let her go. He was a man willing to fight, willing to protect, and willing to face the shadows within himself. Her husband's hand rested lightly on her back, a reminder that love and loyalty could take many forms, each valid, each strong. Kalen realized that the bond between them was not a threat but a complement, a union forged in courage and respect. The serpentine shadow lashed again, more violently this time, but the barrier held firm. The children's energy grew, forming streaks of golden light that struck at the darkness like lightning. Kalen, drawing strength from Leora and the family standing beside him, focused all his energy into a single, steady force. With a final, resonant shout, Leora released her magic fully, a wave of light that swept over the cliffs, striking the shadow with such intensity that it shrieked and recoiled. Kalen added his own strength to the surge, and together, the family became an unstoppable force of unity and courage. The shadow screamed, twisting and writhing, before finally dissolving into nothingness, leaving only the night sky and the gentle sound of wind over the cliffs. The energy dissipated slowly, the children's glow dimming to a soft, protective shimmer. Kalen sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. Leora moved beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You stood," she said quietly. "You faced the darkness and you did not falter. Redemption is yours if you choose it." He looked at her, the weight of years pressing on him, but also a strange lightness, the freedom that comes from facing fear and failure. I never want to lose them again," he admitted. "Or you." Leora's lips curved into a small smile, gentle and reassuring. "Then stay with us, not as someone who protects from the shadows alone, but as someone who chooses to stand beside us." Her husband stepped closer, nodding in quiet approval. "Strength comes from loyalty, not possession. You fought well, Kalen. Let that be enough." The children ran forward, small hands brushing against Kalen and their father. Their laughter, soft and light, filled the cliffs, driving away the lingering tension. Kalen bent down, letting them climb onto his knees, and for the first time he felt a sense of belonging, a connection that went beyond pride, past mistakes and fear. Leora watched, her heart full, knowing that this night had changed everything. The curse had tested them, but it had also reminded them of what mattered: courage, loyalty, and love that endured through shadow and fire. The night sky deepened, stars appearing above Eldrith like scattered diamonds. Kalen, Leora, her husband, and the children stood together on the cliffs, looking down at the kingdom that had once seemed so daunting, so full of challenges they could not face. Now they had faced the greatest darkness of all, the curse, the shadows, and the regrets of the past, and they had survived, together. As dawn began to break, painting the cliffs with hues of gold and rose, Kalen realized that redemption was not a single act but a journey. He had faced the shadows of the past and chosen to stand with those he cared for, letting loyalty and courage guide his actions. He had fought not just for survival, but for connection, trust, and love. Leora's hand found his, a simple gesture, yet one that carried the weight of understanding, forgiveness, and hope. Her husband's hand rested on her back, steady and supportive, a reminder that love could take many forms, each valid, each strong. The children's laughter carried on the wind, a symbol of the future, bright and unbroken, even in a world of shadows. Kalen knew that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, bound by trust, loyalty, and the strength of their hearts.